deal with the crisis, on June 25th, the 2nd Vermont Brigade was detached from the Washington defenses and assigned to active field duty as part of the 1st Corps of the Army of the Potomac, and began its march north to expel the invaders. Here, the 14th and the other parts of the brigade performed one of their most impressive achievements. In the heat of late June, in their wool uniforms, and having their full packs on their backs and rifles on their shoulders, the men marched roughly 120 miles in 6 days to arrive at Gettysbury on July 1st, a pace of 20 miles a day. Wow. At the reunion, it was recalled that heat and exhaustion rendered more of the regiment ineffective than the coming battle would. But at this point in the war, with many units on both sides badly depleted, the 14th and the rest of the 2nd Vermont were one of the larger units to take the field. Bone-tired, sweaty and sore, the men of the 14th Vermont nevertheless quickened their pace as they neared Gettysburg and heard the sounds of a battle that was already well underway. Arriving a little after 4 p.m. on July 1st, the Vermonters were too late to take part in the fight on that day. Instead, being positioned near the center of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge, the Vermonters bedded down for the night in their exhaustion, barely stopping to remove their packs from their pack to serve as pillows. After a tense night sleeping on the battlefield, the 14th awoke on July 2nd for the second day of their baptism by fire. For most of the morning and afternoon, the regiment was out of action as fighting raged in the distance on the far left and far right of the Union line. Late that evening, around 7 p.m. as the sun began to set, the 14th and the rest of the brigade were called to meet the enemy for the first time. Anderson's division of the Confederate Army had launched an attack on the center of the Union line, and with Federal reserves having already been sent to support other imperiled positions, the assault, although small, ripped a gap in the Union position. The 2nd Vermont Brigade, as one of the few relatively fresh formations available, was sent in to plug the hole, and its presence managed to startle the Confederates and drive them back with minimal loss. For George G. Meade, Jr., the son of the Union commander who witnessed the evening events, the 14th and other Vermont regiments had presented disaster and saved the entire Federal position with their timely entry into the line. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, and the morning of the 3rd dawned clear and hot and muggy. The morning passed with the men of the 14th remaining in their position from the previous day, unsure of where the next blow would fall from Lee's army. The answer was revealed by the fire of 150 rebel artillery guns that began to bombard the Union center around 1 p.m., producing the largest noise on the North American continent until the test of the nuclear bomb at Trinity, New Mexico in 1945. The Vermonters were forced to stay in line even as artillery shells exploded above and around them, taking advantage of whatever shelter they could find from the storm of metal. In the heat of the July sun, there was only one source of water nearby, a small spring that had become a favorite target area for Confederate sharpshooters that had to be braved by any man who wanted to refill his canteen. Surprising as it may seem, however, many veterans of the brigade reported a strange sense of peace overcame them as the bombardment continued for 2 hours straight, with some even stating that they were lulled into a kind of light sleep amid the howl of exploding shells. At 3 p.m., the actual Confederate attack known as Pickett's Charge began, as 15,000 Confederate troops advanced across a mile of open ground to attack the Union position on Cemetery Ridge. The 14th was on the far left edge of the attack, with Kemper's brigade of Pickett's division marching directly against their position. General Standard gave a firm order to Colonel Nichols as the Confederates approached. The 14th was to hold their fire until the rebels got into point-blank range. Then the boys of the 14th were to fire, fix bayonets, and counter-charge. Just as Kemper's men got into range, however, they wheeled to their left in front of the astonished Vermonters to close the gap that had opened up between them and the rest of Pickett's men. Great, so this was where the 14th was, and Kemper's men are approaching this way. And then when they get right around here, they suddenly make a wheel to their left to the Vermonters' right because the rest of the attack had sort of drifted further to the north and they needed to close up to concentrate their assault.
So is that Cemetery Ridge going across?
Yeah. So Cemetery Ridge is going here. North is that way. South is that way. West is at the top of the page, more or less, if that helps orient it. It was at this point that Stannard saw an opportunity that would make the fame of the 14th Vermont and the rest of the brigade. Ordering the 14th open fire on the turning rebels, Stannard had the 13th and 16th Vermont regiments maneuver to launch an attack on the rear of the enemy column. So that's what you see here. So the 14th is continuing to fire at the Confederates that are slowly turning to their right, and meanwhile Stannard is having the 13th and the 16th go around and then sort of create a crossfire that trapped the Confederates. Hit with fire from two sides, Kemper's men lost all their momentum and were unable to exploit limited Confederate success further up the line and made their retreat. This success led the acting commander of the First Corps, after Doubleday of baseball fame, to call out, glory to God, see the Vermonters go it." The danger to the Union position was not removed, however, as two Southern brigades under Wilcox and Lang, which is incorrectly labeled as Posey here, that had been assigned to support Pickett's flank, now tardily approached the Vermonters' position. Stannard, reversing his flanking maneuver, had the 16th Vermont and half of the 14th, under Lieutenant Colonel Rose, wheel about 180 degrees to launch an attack on the rear of Wilcox's brigade, once again blunting the rebel attack. So you can see that because the Confederate attack was sort of so split up, the Vermonters, because of their position, really had a great opportunity. So after Pickett's men had been dispersed, what Stannard does is he sends the 16th out to attack Wilcox and Lang as they move up, and with the 14th in support, they're basically able to do the same thing all over again that they had done to Kemper's brigade during Pickett's actual assault. This then was the end of the first and only battle of the 14th Vermont. Already, however, contemporaries recognized the importance of their contribution to the Union victory. The 2nd Vermont Brigade was officially commended in Doubleday's order of the day, and the 13th, 14th, and 16th Vermont had the battle honor of Gettysbury added to their flags. More unofficial, but perhaps more appreciated thanks came from the veterans of the 1st Vermont Brigade, the old veterans, who had been held in reserve during the battle, and offered their congratulations to their fellow Green Mountaineers, despite derisively calling them 9-month hatchlings not too long before.
Calling them what?
9-month hatchlings, because they only served for 9 months. Although it participated in the initial pursuit of Lee's retreating forces, on the 18th of July, with its enlistments expired, the 14th Vermont was relieved of duty and began making the long trip back to Brattleboro. Although many of the soldiers would re-enlist in other Vermont units, the 14th itself was now a part of history. 27 of its men had died in battle, and 39 from disease, and 74 had been wounded at Gettysburg, but the regiment had not suffered one loss from desertion. For much of its military career, the 14th was similar to many other regiments of 9-month enlistees, units that were often put on quiet garrison duty, then disappeared from memory at the end of their term. But when it found itself called upon, the regiment fulfilled its duty with a competence and quality beyond the standard of many veteran formations. Its spirit is best summed up by an anonymous member quoted in Stewart's history of Pickett's charge. "I was a soldier, not for money or office, glory or renown, nor because I expect to enjoy fighting or its horrid sights and scenes of battle. My country was assailed, and I felt it a personal duty to respond, and therefore volunteered." Thank you.
Wow.
And if I can get this to work, I have some pictures of the flag as well, but I guess that is also covered in the snowstorm. But this is actually something you all might find very interesting. The sort of brochure, or I don't know what you want to call it, the glossy book of that regimental reunion in 1887 that I talked about is available online from Google Books. And what's interesting is that in the back, they have, in an era before Facebook, something you very much needed, sort of every living member of the regiment they could find organized by company, and they list sort of their last known address, street address if they have it. If not, just a town. So for example, you can see Austin Peck there. And we have a couple other people from East Middlebury, Walter and Edgar Olmsted, and then a bunch of people also from Middlebury as well. So especially for those of you, who are interested in genealogical research, I think it would be, a great resource, and maybe if the members agree, it might be something we could have a link to on the website or something, since it is very much out of copyright. So I don't think anyone would object.
You should probably mention that we have a collection of Austin Peck's letters that
Okay.
he wrote home here on our collection, if anybody would like to read them. They're
Definitely.
pretty interesting.
Yeah. He was apparently reduced in rank, so I'd be interested to hear the story that happened to that. So yeah, but I guess questions, if anyone has them, otherwise I'm
Well, how many men were in them?
roughly 900.
So 800 lived.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
it was kind of, for basically 8.5 months of its service, it was basically on very easy duty, and the real danger was sort of just 19th century illness, which
Yeah.
you would be experiencing anyway if you lived, around DC at that time. So
Having gone through the day we had yesterday, I can't imagine being in a wool suit, wool uniform with a backpack
Yeah, that's a lot of
on weather like yesterday.
Yeah.
Benedict, in one of his first letters, he's writing about like when they had to do their first sort of parade review at Brattleboro, where they were in camp, and he talks about how eventually you just sort of become numb to all the pain because it's painful everywhere, and your sort of only consolation is that the fellow next to you is suffering just as much as you, so you have sort of a camaraderie in that, if nothing
Yeah.
else.
So when they signed up and volunteered, it was for the rest to the war?
Just for 9 months. So,
Oh, 9 months?
Yeah,
Oh,
9
I
months
guess I
term of
missed that.
enlistment. That's what Benedict attributes to the fact that they sort of had so many professional middle class people in the regiment, because it was sort of, you could go do your duty to Uncle Sam, but not be away from home long enough that it's going to affect like your law firm or your
Oh.
your mercantile business or what have you.
Oh.
So they were still, I think, sort of optimistic in 1862 that if they could have one last big push of volunteers, they could finish the war. So,
Yeah.
And it didn't finish till 1865?
Right.
You've probably seen the grave up in the cemetery, Mosby grave.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Now, I thought that was spelled M-O-S-B.
I've seen MOSBY, but it could be one of those things where it's a 19th century last name, so it sort of
Right.
fluctuated.
Yeah,
No, I think,
but if it's on the grave, it has an
Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
I think, well, I did a lot of research on that, the monument that's over there, and
Mhm.
I came up with, and I don't know how to start it. The Emery Bidwell, it says on that he was taken by Mosby, right?
Yeah.
All right. There was a guerrilla person with his little gang of people named Moberly, who was disliked intensely by all the people in his area of the South. But what he did was also make raids on people.
From the north.
Yes.
By get whatever they could get. And what they would do was then they go home and go right back into the civilization, and you wouldn't know that they were out at night doing that. Well, who were the people who lived across the street? A couple.
Here?
They're gone. No, yeah. Oh, anyway. They were very involved with the historical society.
Oh, the Wilkinsons.
The Wilkinsons,
Oh, right.
yes.
Right.
And her husband went out and bought, or he came home and he said that he had seen a biography of Mosby. And so his wife said, well, why didn't you get it? Well, I went to get it. Instead of being $5, it was $25.